Hello Internet, this is Daniel with Driving and Dragons, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about plot hooks and for your adventures, and specifically I'm going to talk about what I refer to as the crisis hook. See you on the other side. So the crisis hook. First, let's just establish what a plot hook or a character hook is as it pertains to a tabletop role-playing game. The hook is the narrative element that the game master uses to provoke the players into going on the adventure or the mission. And they come in all different flavors and varieties. And today we're going to go over what I call a crisis hook. I like the crisis hook because this is one that is very, very easy for newer or less experienced GMs to use effectively. And it's just a good, solid way to get an adventure started. It starts with some action. It does a lot of things that helps allay some of the concerns and issues that especially a newer GM has when it comes to things like making sure their game's fun. How do I kick it off? How do I ramp up the pace? How do I get the excitement going? How do I get everybody into the spirit of playing the game? And how do I make sure they go on the adventure? Now, one thing we have to say is, there's two things. There's two important points I got to make real quick. One is the social contract. If your players have just decided that the social contract does not apply to them, it doesn't matter what your hook is, it's going to be a problem. Part of the agreement, the unspoken agreement between a game master and the players is that he's going to give you an adventure and you're going to go on it. Now, the game master has to do their part to make it compelling and make it something that would fit with your characters and make it something that's meaningful. But at the same time, the player has an obligation to not be obtuse about things and just be the character that's never going to go off on any kind of adventure. And, you're going to have to give them exactly the specific hook they want for their character in order for them to just play the game. So that is one thing. The next thing is understanding the difference between linear story or progression, or even not necessarily linear story progression, but just story progression in general, and character motivation, and railroading. Railroading is when agency is taken away. Railroading is when the players do not have another option, or are very, very heavily hamstrung into a particular action. It is not setting up a strong reason why they would go on an adventure, why they would go on a mission. It is not taking away their agency to give them a strong motivating reason to go on an adventure, or to put them in a situation where they have to make a choice, and that choice just so happens to be in the direction of the adventure that the game master has put together. That's not railroading. That's simply putting into effect a set of circumstances that leads to the game that everybody wants to play. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the crisis hook. The reason it's called the crisis hook is because when you're motivating a player, there's only a handful of different things that can get him motivated or can motivate his character to move forward. There's reward, there's personal backstory reasons, emotional reasons, that sort of thing. There's action-based situations where they're not necessarily forced, but they're kind of driven into it because of things that are beyond their control. There's environmental causes. What the crisis hook is you put a crisis before the players. It's not a guy comes to give you a job. You're going to be hired. It's not the king calls you to his court and asks you to serve the kingdom. It's not part of my ongoing quest to find my lost sister. It's not, there's a massive thunderstorm and we have to run into this cave. All right? Those are not a crisis hook. A crisis hook is something that is unexpected and off the beaten path a little bit, and is something that demands to be resolved immediately. So an example would be you're playing Cyberpunk, and a fixer reaches out and has a job. They have a job for you and your crew, and you're supposed to meet this fixer to hear about this job. However, when you go to meet the fixer, all of a sudden, a booster gang shows up, takes off with your vehicle. You're going to chase them. I mean, you don't have to, but now you've got a crisis. Our Nomad's vehicle just got stolen. Or a person just got kidnapped. Maybe it's the fixer has a girlfriend, his main input's over there sitting at the door while he's talking to you guys, and somebody crashes in and kidnaps his person. Now, instead of the job he hired you for, he's throwing money on the table saying, look, you've got to go save her. Go save her. We'll make sure the reward is worth it when you get back. I promise you I've got to get this we'll take care of this. The crisis hook is you put the players into a situation where a snap decision has to be made with little or no information, and they know that they only get one shot to make that decision. It is not something they can come back and negotiate. It is not something that they can come back and talk to others about. It is not something that they can put a lot of thought into. It is a crisis has occurred. How are you going to handle the crisis? Are you going to ignore it? Are you going to pursue it? Are you going to exploit it? How are you going to handle this crisis? A great example of a crisis hook, in my opinion, is the old Arrrrggg I think it's an Arrrrggg adventure, but it's an old Cyberpunk 2020 adventure called Cabin Fever. It's a locked room scenario, and the way it starts off is players get hired by this fixer to do this job where they're going to attack this boat in harbor, and they're going to steal some prototype cyberware or something that's on this boat. And when the boat pulls in, they're going to jump onto it, and they're going to steal the containers and bring them back, and that's the job. And they, of course, you accept it because it's the job and you're going to do it. When they go out to the boat that night, the boat explodes and sprays poison gas everywhere, driving the players to make a decision. They either have to stay out there where the boat exploded and this poison gas is coming down. They either have to try to run from it, and they're seeing people die from it all over the place, or they got to dive into a building or something, and the obvious choice is this bar. Once they dive into the bar, the adventure is actually a locked room scenario in the bar. Even complete to the point where when they first get into the bar, that toxic fumes are seeping in, and they're having to go plug up the holes to make sure that the gas can't get into the bar. And then you got a myriad of characters in the bar that the players would have had no knowledge of beforehand. The only person they have knowledge of is that fixer is in the bar. And they have to determine, did he set them up? Did he know? Were they fall guys? What else does he know? But there's also several other characters in that bar. A cyber psycho, or somebody who's on the verge of cyber psychosis. A company man who is part of the group that set up the explosion, and he's nervously chatting away on the phone, the bartender. You're now in this very tense locked room scenario. That was a crisis hook. The players were presented with a regular adventure. They're going towards it. Boom, crisis, make a decision. This is a very good tactic to use if you are a new GM. It's a very good tactic for a couple of reasons. One, this is going to put your character, 9 times out of 10, this is going to put your character straight into the action. It is very easy to get players to make quick, decisive actions when they're in a hot situation where things have to go quickly. It's going to ramp up the excitement in your game, because while they're trying to figure out what their characters are going to do, because 15 things are happening all at once, they're trying to process all the information at one time too. This isn't planned out. They don't know each other, especially if it's the first session. They don't know each other's battle tactics. They don't know how each other's going to work. Everything is chaos, and chaos makes excitement. And And it's easy to do because you don't have to, no matter what your players do. Let's say you do have some of those players who are very loose with the social contract and they want to goof off and run around and ignore your character hook. Townsperson, the rumor is that there's treasure in these goblin caves to the east, and they just want to go west because you told them they need to go east, and that's just what they're going to do. Those kind of players have a hard time dealing with a crisis hook because they don't have information that tells them where the adventure is headed. They just have a situation that they absolutely must respond to and must respond to quickly. And by the time they've made the decision, they're already on the adventure. There's no, unless they're just going to be straight jackasses, they're not going to be able to really turn away from the adventure path, at least not immediately. So it's a great way of handling those annoying players who want to test the boundaries of their agency by more or less intentionally trying to screw up the adventure for everybody else. So take this crisis hook and put it in your toolbox. The two best ways you can use it can be used as a great catalyst to bring a group together on an original adventure, because maybe they don't know each other. Maybe they're in a bar. They're all in the tavern. They don't know each other. They don't have a reason to talk to each other. But when a raging gang of orcs kicks in the tavern door and raids the village, and now they have to fight to defend the village, and they're the only survivors except for one guy, they had a crisis situation that they had to band together and act together. It's great for first adventures because you don't have to worry about melding everybody's backstory together into one hook to get the whole group to go together. And it's a great defense against these problem players. The second point, it's a great backup as a secondary hook. If your first hook or your second hook gets missed, if the trail of clues you leave out is just missed because your players just are very, very linear, like video game type players who need the quest giver with the giant question mark over the top of their head, and they even ask questions out of game like, where's our quest giver? It's like, that's not how role-playing games work. You don't just have quest givers standing around town with exclamation points above their head. Crisis hooks are a great way to spur them into action, to thump them on the nose and say, hey, you dummy, pay attention right here. It's a great way to be super obvious without grabbing them by the neck and dragging them in the direction you want them to go. So that's the way I like to use the crisis hook. If you got some examples of good crisis hooks or other good story and character hooks, leave them below and let me know what you got going on. And we'll see you next time when we talk about the next type of hook. Talk to you later.